Welcome everybody to our December 2020 technical training meeting. Let's go ahead and get started. On the screen is just an agenda for today's meeting. We just have some training opportunities. Got just one item there, and then some new business. We have a technical monitoring, just a review of what our schedule looks like that Dalton will be going over in a minute. And then Brad has wanted to just talk a little bit about our status, or an agency status update during COVID, and then also about a desktop monitoring that DOE recently did. We got the results back on that. And then the main topic of the meeting today is going to be Ashrae 62.2 review and documentation. It's probably going to be more covering what DOE found during their desktop monitoring. So we'll get to that, and that'll be the meat of the meeting today. So with that, I actually forgot to hit record for the first couple minutes of the meeting, so we're going to join Dalton here as he is talking about just our upcoming technical monitoring schedule. We've made a couple of changes, and I think you're just going to catch the tail end of him going through the schedule here.
And so we've got Bragg is going to be next week, December 7th through the 10th. 5 County is now in January, the 11th through the 14th. UTA is still in February, the 16th through the 25th. Southeast, you guys are in March, the 22nd through the 25th. MAG, you guys are April 6th and 7th. And then 6 County, the April 19th through the 22nd. So we just wanted to bring that to all your guys' attention, just so you can start planning for Turner and I to visit. And we will be sending out, like usual, about 4 to 6 weeks before our visit, we'll send out pre-monitoring letters. So that's all I have on that. Do you guys have any questions?
I'm hearing none. If you do, reach out to Dalton or myself.
Yep.
So, all right. And then I think my next slide is Brad's. Brad, do you want me to turn over presenter power?
No, I don't.
All right. Just tell me when to.
Pretty much it. Just, kind of talking a little bit about the obvious, the case counts, everybody knows, gone through the roof, and it was inevitable sooner or later we were going to, as a program, start seeing and feeling that impact. There's been situations where, people in the program staff are contracting or being quarantined. Likewise, we're having more issues with the clients actually becoming aware of not wanting us in their homes and things like that. And I said, when we started seeing those numbers go up, I knew this was going to happen. We even talked about it, in the spring and summer as we were kind of coming out of this, that there was a good chance we were going to see this, what they were talking about then, the fall resurgence. And it looks like it could be a long winter for us here, even though there's some, promising news with the vaccine. It's going to take quite a while for that to get deployed and for us to realize the benefit from that. So, I just wanted to take a few minutes. And the first thing is, I want to just get the obvious out of the way. At no point did we really ever expect that we were going to make contract this year just because of the virus. And that's okay. Everybody in the world literally understands the situation we're in right now. There are some thresholds that we're going to be concerned about, and in the spring there's some certain thresholds we have to meet with the Department of Energy, and it's not even because it's something they want to enforce. It's something that's covered in a federal statute or a federal law. There's just certain things that, even though they want to give us some leeway, they don't have the authority to do that. Neither do I. And I think we'll be okay. We met those thresholds last year. And I think we'll meet them again this year. There's been a fair amount of work that was done over the summer and even into early fall where you were able to get some work done. And I think that, along with what we'll be able to accomplish throughout the rest of the year, will keep us in a good position. That being said, too, at no point does anything change about the message of us wanting quality work. It's more important that the work is done right the first time than just to slam and go and get a bunch of numbers on the board that turn back around and haunt us later. That being said, too, like the slide says, I need to be more informed of what's going on. There's some things that have transpired in some of the agencies in the last few weeks that I'm finding out a little bit later. I have to keep Department of Energy and other people informed of the impact to our program as well. So I need to know if we're having issues, with, just staff or entire offices being shut down, client issues, supply chain. And, if your agency, your parent organization starts making decisions that impact operations as well. I need to know that. If your organization is putting a halt to some of your activities in the field and you're transitioning back to that training mode that we were in the spring, we need to be advised of that. I need to remind the coordinators that are on the call today too, that if you're getting to a point where you're not able to produce any units, you need to be giving me some type of a report accounting for the activities that are going on. We need to still account for that funding that is going out. Our intentions are, again, to try to keep everybody employed. We don't want to see any impact to our workforce. We need you. We've invested a lot of time and money in getting you trained, and we want to keep you on the payroll. So we need to make sure we're accounting for those dollars in other ways when we can't show production as well. So just with all those things in mind, just keep us up to date. I don't need to sometimes know all the nitty gritty details of, exactly who has what and when and where and why and how, but we do need to know what those impacts to the program are. So that being said, was everybody clear on the virus? Does anybody have any questions about that? Just about how it pertains to the program or anything else? All righty. Sounds like nobody's got any concerns there. Like everybody else, we're tired of hearing about it. And there we go. So as Matt alluded, Department of Energy did what was called the desktop monitoring of us. So in lieu of them coming out, they selected, actually I selected the sample. They wanted one NEAT and one MIA from each agency, which we provided them. That sample was a 2019 production year. So that was all stuff that was done from last year. And I specifically chose jobs that we had already monitored because I also wanted them, their analysis of those audits to be compared against what we were monitoring. As you can see on the slide, they actually came back with 10 total comments. There were 3 findings, 4 concerns, and 3 recommendations. And in my usual cheerful, chipper, friendly, caring, sensitive way, I responded along with the help of my staff. And in some cases, some of you helped give us some information. And at the end of the day, we ended up concurring with 2 of the findings and 2 of the concerns. The others we have rebutted with considerable information, I think, and we will await any response they might have. After today's training or whatever, when Turner sends out his CEU, there'll be a copy of an abbreviated and redacted version of that report. I want you all to actually see the information that was communicated to us, their actual words, and let you see and understand some of these things that we have been kind of, I guess, for the literary term is called foreshadowing. For the last several years, we have talked extensively to you all about the need to document and all these things because someday there was going to be somebody else coming along and looking over our shoulder. And this is that someday. And as you can see, again, there were things that they found. There was a considerable amount of the items that they brought up that were identified from our monitorings. And I was very pleased with that. It shows us that our system is working and that we're accomplishing what we need to be doing when we come out and take a look at your agencies. And keep that in mind. You that have experienced the auditors, the QCIs, and the coordinators are the ones that kind of get the more firsthand experience with our monitoring. Keep in mind, you are fairly aware of how detailed and thorough we have been in our work over the last 3, 4, 5 years. And yet they still found stuff that we did not identify. And so I want you to keep that in mind. Again, there's a lot of information that we produce. And if somebody sits down and reads it and goes through it, there's a pretty good chance that they will find problems. And that's why we continue to stress the need to be accurate and consistent with your information. And those were probably some of the more common issues found, was that the accuracy and consistency of the information in the client file was not there. This report, it is an evaluation of the entire program. Don't concern yourself with what they found at any one particular organization. It is a reflection of all of our work. And that means that they, quite frankly, they found stuff on all 7 of you. It wasn't just one agency, it was everybody. Across the board, there were some things that they found in every organization. We've developed some corrective action plans, and starting with the training that you're going to receive here in a few minutes, that is one component of it. There's going to be additional stuff brought up in the January technical meeting, and there will be other things that we will be looking at and implementing with the program as well. And you'll see some of that in that abbreviated report that's going to be going out to you all later today. And so just again, keep in mind, I feel personally we did really actually pretty good in this, especially when I compare it to what I've heard from some of the other states that have gone through some of these things. This is probably my, I don't know, 5th, maybe 6th monitoring, at least the 5th monitoring I've gone through with DOE over the years. And so I think in comparison as well too, again, I feel pretty good about where we landed on this. I was happy that somebody else came in, took a look. You know, for so many years we've been out there working, and we felt like we were heading in the right direction. But the report actually, I think, also validated that our monitoring process is effective, and likewise that our training is effective, because all that monitoring we do, all we do is turn right around and develop training that will reinforce and support that stuff. So with that being said, is there anything, any questions, just without getting into this, that you have about the report or monitoring or in general? Come on now. I know somebody's got a question.
It'll come up, I'm sure.
Yeah. What were the findings? Let's see. The findings were on HVAC input and was it the shell, Turner? HVAC and shell input were the 2 findings. And then the concerns were Ashrae and...
Don't remember offhand right now.
Yeah, Ashrae and something else. Go to the top.
Were,
Go to the first
were
page.
they findings because they were statewide?
No, that unlike our monitoring report that gives you a threshold of what constitutes a finding, they don't seem to care to give us that information. So yeah, it was the duct evaluation and the HVAC were the 2 findings. Oh no, HVAC was was a finding, and then the concerns were on the shell and Ashrae. So yeah, this is the summary that I put on the report, and it covers our timelines for the corrective action plans, et cetera, et cetera. So quite frankly, the HVAC didn't come as a complete surprise. I even pointed it out to DOE. It was almost a little bit of a double dipping. They had brought up as you know, we covered even in the technical training this fall, they had covered the issues of steady state versus AFUE on the furnaces and some other things. But there are a few other things that were not covered in the auditing update that they still found. There was some substantial issue with the accuracy of how the appliances were entered into the system, quite frankly, and the documentation of the system as well. So those are going to be things that the guys will be covering with you, and like I said, in subsequent trainings. And then the Duct, same thing. We knew from the audit tool approval that what their expectations were on the Duct and ours were not aligned. And part of that was I directed the guys to take a softer implementation. I just felt like at the time we were making so many other moves in other areas, and I rated those as a higher priority for implementation. So that's what the staff was training you. So Dalton, Turner, and Wade, that's why you were seeing more things. I made it a priority for the program to get better at air sealing. And so that's why you were getting more training on things like zonal diagnostics. The worst case draft to me was a bigger priority. I wanted to make sure that we were doing those safety things that needed to be happening in the household. And so there were other things that I prioritized over the implementation of the Duct evaluation. And it wasn't that the guys hadn't found that. Turner had been advocating and, pushing towards that for a while. And when you read the report, one of the things we have to identify on those findings of things is a root cause. And I wholeheartedly accepted part of that responsibility because it was a conscious decision I made not to prioritize it. That being said, it's December 1st, Merry Christmas. My gift to you is we're going to start prioritizing Duct evaluation. Imagine that.
Yay.
So it's going to be something that you're going to probably see and hear a lot on your monitoring reports. So brace for impact. That's the way it works, right? It rolls downhill. So, but those are, and you basically, if you take a look at this chart, those are our priorities. Those things, some of them we were already working on. The HVAC, the Duct were both topics that we had covered in the fall technical training. And, we've got a couple other things. We're going to loop back around to Ashrae today. And as you can see, it was a concern. And then likewise, that other concern, the shell data collection and modeling errors. And I think I even pointed it out to a couple of people. To me, the word finding, concern, recommendation, I don't get too wrapped around it. To me, it's just a priority rating. If it's a finding, you need to address it now. If it's a concern, you need to address it soon, but you got a little bit of time. If it's a recommendation, it's something you just need to look at how you're going to work that into the system. In this case, I chose not to agree with their recommendations. So, and it wasn't just me, it was the team. But and likewise, there's a couple of the concerns that they're not concerns. And we'll see if they actually amend the report as I requested they do. So thank you, Jessica.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
And I didn't notice if you have more slides or if that covered.
That was it.
Okay.
Yeah. Other than that, like I said, the biggest thing looming out there, just because I have everybody here, it's got a good turnout. Looks like we got like 39 people on right now. Just where the program's going. So right now, we're under a continuing resolution that doesn't really have any impact to us. In the next week or two, Congress is, they're working on coming up with a finalized budget to get us through the rest of the year. They have, I think, until the 12th of December or something like that as the deadline. But all the indications I've been getting are they're going to come up with something. More than likely, what I'm hearing is it's going to be another CR or continuing resolution that just puts it into the new administration and the new Congress after the first of the year. So they'll do some type of a CR that'll take us through to end of January or first part of February. Some of you may be connected and listening to NCAF and some of these other organizations. There is quite a bit of chatter, and it's pretty serious, about a possible $3 billion stimulus package that would go to weatherization. It was getting a lot more talk a few weeks ago. I haven't heard much in the last week and a half. But while the network is not saying no, because you don't really get an input on what money they give you, but we are cautioning them. The national organizations, that is, are cautioning the lobbyists and the legislators back in DC that we're experiencing the impacts from COVID, supply chain, and all these other things, and giving us that kind of money and expecting those immediate results that new administrations want to present as success could be harmful to the program. So we're hoping that some of those people that do support us will listen, and as that develops more, my team and your leadership will discuss how we're going to react to that again. But for those of you that remember 2009 to 2012, we could be having a serious case of deja vu. So that's just kind of a general update of what's going on nationally. Other than that, I don't expect a lot to happen between now and the end of the year. So. All right, I think I've taken enough of the guys' time. Let them get on with their training. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks, Brad. Yeah, so for the remainder of our time, we wanted to talk about this first item on this list, which was basically what DOE found concerning Ashrae. And I really like this summary that Brad put together. You'll notice he's kind of showing DOE a timeline on when we're going to start to implement, or we're going to make whatever corrections that we are proposing to make. And you'll notice that some of these things, we were already on top of them. We've already been training on duct issues. We've already been training on heating issues, and we'll continue. Before I jump into the Ashrae stuff, though, as Brad mentioned, when I send out the email that I send out for this meeting, I will include a copy of this report to this group. And we want you guys to read this report. Please take the time to go through it and think about, what DOE was looking for, why they were looking for it, and how that, how you can have an impact on that. There's a lot of interesting and good information in this report. So feel free to go through it. And if you have any questions, I'd encourage you to just write them down in an email and send them to whichever one of us is the most appropriate. I'm sorry, I was just looking at a comment that came in. Is there a timeline for program monitoring and wage training?
Yes, there is.
Yeah. Do you want to elaborate on that at all, Carrie Lynn or Wade?
Yeah. The program monitoring Dalton put up, I mean, if you're talking my programmatic monitoring, like always, that's kind of in flux. These guys are shuffling the deck a little bit, so I'm trying to shuffle my stuff around now and put some things on there. And I'm probably going to drag my heels a little bit because of the spike right now. Obviously, I need to be conscious about my traveling. I'm thinking about that a little bit too, but and Wade still has not got around to plotting his visits. He's looking at after the first of the year. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, thanks. I was just curious just time-wise with everything being as high as it is. And then you had asked us for Wade's training to kind of come up with some ideas. So I was just wondering what our timeline to be prepared was.
Tomorrow.
Okay, I'll get right on that.
Problem solved.
Awesome. Yeah, the one thing I wanted to say about just this desk monitoring in general, I wanted to thank you guys. You know, as we've showed you, DOE had 10 issues, concerns, recommendations, findings, and we were able to whittle that down to 4. And even those findings and stuff, you know, we ended up whittling those things down substantially. And it was because of your good work. It was very easy to defend your files. Like when I went looking in your files, the information was oftentimes was there, and it was where it was supposed to be. And so I really just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate all the hard work that you guys do to make those files as accurate as possible.
I'm going to echo that because I only had to make 2 requests. Everything else I needed was in there. I only asked for 2 things from the network in our rebuttal and response. And believe me, I enjoyed my response, writing it multiple times. Turner had to talk me back from the ledge.
Well, it's if you could imagine, like, put yourself in DOE shoes. There's a couple of folks that were involved in reviewing this, and they get the pleasure of reviewing, you know, 7 to 15 other states' files as well. If you could imagine trying to keep on top of each state's individual policies and stuff. A lot of this was us just responding and saying, oh, this is our policy and this is why we did it this way. And I expect that DOE will, you know, be totally fine with a lot of our non-concurrence on stuff. So, but yeah, it was a good monitoring. I appreciate what they've done and what they've helped, you know, point out for us. But it was really cool to be able to go through and just show that we had good policy and you guys were doing a great job following that and documenting things. So thank you very much for that. So with that, really, you know, we always tend to focus on these little mistakes and errors and stuff. And my goal in doing that today, because that is where we're headed, is just to show you guys what it looks like from DOE's perspective, from somebody else's perspective, in the hopes that we can improve, because we are never going to be perfect. There's always going to be some errors. You know, if we have so many things that we do in weatherization. Our error rate is never going to be, you know, perfect, but we're always striving to be better. So with that, let's talk about Ashrae. So this is what I'm just going to scroll into the report here for a second. And I think I'm going to jump into the DOE, what DOE found, and we're going to talk about it a little bit. Because I think we'll get more into this and probably not have as much time as I'd like to have to just do a general Ashrae overview. So I think I'll save the general Ashrae overview for another time. But this was what DOE said, just their general statement. It said, on several jobs, there is Ashrae documentation that appears to be inconsistent or ambiguous. That was what they found, and they had this as a concern. And I felt like although they didn't really define well, you know, what constitutes a concern or you know, a finding or whatever, I felt like it's similar to what we do. It's kind of based on the amount of risk, and you know, this one is a risk to the program. If we don't get Ashrae right, we are spending health and safety dollars. And if we make a minor error here or there, then we could accidentally install something we shouldn't be installing, or we may not provide enough ventilation to a home and leave a client in an unsafe situation. So I feel like a concern is legitimate for that. Anyway, and then they outline some details from a few jobs, and we'll jump into those in a minute. I've got some slides for that. And then it just says, you know, this was what DOE was asking us. It says the grantee needs to investigate these apparent discrepancies and report back to DOE the results of that investigation. And if necessary, the grantee needs to develop a corrective action plan, complete with proposed solutions, addressing the issues noted, and a timeline and milestones for the implementation of those solutions. And then our response was that we concur with the concern. And our summary was the investigation revealed that state QCI did identify one of the noted issues. So it was found during our monitoring. And as noted in the monitoring reports provided by DOE, so we had found one of the things they found, and we'd already documented that and showed them. And then it says the remaining two were not identified. Research did reveal the agency's QCI comments on an intermittent fan run were regarding ramp up of a fan when the motion sensor activates, and state monitoring did find the fans were on continuous run. So basically just kind of responding to some of these details they provided. I'll jump into that in a bit. And then our proposed corrective action plan. So during PY20, the Utah WAP will cover Ashrae errors in an upcoming technical training meeting. Welcome to that meeting. That's what we're doing today, because we told DOE we would do that. A key point will be made to train individuals who are both inputting and reviewing the data to cross-check. So that was really one of the main things that we noticed here is just that need to cross-check, and that will make more sense here in a minute. Other training points will be conducting accurate estimates, final calculations, minimizing discrepancies, and required agency checks to verify that a house actually meets Ashrae post-weatherization. We're going to make some monitoring changes. So our corrective action says we're going to do some training. We're going to change a few things on our monitoring, and then also on our documentation. So our monitoring changes will be to refinement of existing checks in the monitoring tool to better cross-check information. This will be added immediately to check the 5 agencies that have not yet been monitored in program year 20. So we already have a check on our monitoring. Basically, when we get to that check, we're just going to look a little closer at some of this stuff. And we've already monitored 2 agencies for the year, so that's why we mentioned that we'll include that and make sure we make those checks with the other 5. And then documentation changes. The Utah WAP will review and explore possible changes to the Ashrae tool or calculator to include an intermittent runtime calculation. This will be explored after technical training to allow for network feedback. So, and I've got a start on that. I'll share that with you in a minute. So those are the 3 things we told DOE we're going to do. We haven't heard back from DOE, so this could change a little bit, but we don't want to let a technical meeting go by without getting started on what we need to be taken care of. So, so with that, let me jump in back to my slides here, and I'm going to skip a couple of just general slides that I had, and maybe. And I want to just jump into some of those details. So DOE basically said, hey, we looked at this one file and we noticed some issues. We had some questions. And so before I pull up what the details were, I want you guys to look at this file and tell me if you notice any issues. And I want you just to speak up or hit us up here in the chat and just like looking at this documentation, what do you guys notice? Because their general comment was they noticed some discrepancies in our documentation. And if you're aware of whose file this is, please don't please don't share that information, because again, this is really, the point of this is not to focus on any individual or agency, just on how we can improve from what we've been given. Anybody notice anything on this?
So oh, sorry, we have an echo. All right, thank you. So I'm seeing, I just want to confirm that the top right, the bath like location one, that's audit intake, is that right? Or field collection?
Yeah, thank you. So this is A03. This is a field collection form.
Mhm. And so assuming that the left Ashrae documentation is for the audit, then the bath CFM is not at 0, is one of the things I've noticed.
Okay. So you're saying on this bath, the CFM over here doesn't, there's a discrepancy between those two? Is that what?
So it's saying 80 and then 50.
Okay.
So I guess, well, you do evaluate at what you're going to put it in as, so I guess that would be correct, but the 23, unless that's being changed out, then it would need to be switched to 23 CFM.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, and that is both of these things are things that DOE noticed and noted. Anybody notice anything else on this one? I'll go ahead and put up the comments from DOE. Was there a comment out there?
So on that number 13 on the bottom right, isn't that their QCI form?
Yeah, this does, and that's, I was gonna ask if anybody noticed that.
CFM is 64, but on the QCI's closeout Ashrae form, they say they have a fan at 80 and 50. So did they fix their 80 and 50? Like
Gotcha.
bathroom 1, where did they document saying that they fixed bathroom 1 to put out 80 and bathroom 2 to put out 50, so that their continuous needed to be?
Yes, and so you're seeing the same type of stuff going on, and if you, DOE also looked at the work order on this one, and that what Carrie Lynn is asking about is, you know, did they do anything to swap these two fans out? And DOE looked at that, and I couldn't figure out how to put all of that data on the screen, but as you can imagine, DOE's taking a look at all of the pieces of the puzzle and making sure that the information that's in here actually is correct. So before I read this, let me just, there was a comment in the chat. The left form shows that bath 1 has an operable window.
Yeah.
And then on the left form, it shows no operable window for the same bathroom.
Yeah, those window discrepancies.
Yes, you are correct. Thank you for that. Okay, so this is what DOE wrote about this job. So, and we tried to take all the job information out of this stuff. Forgive us if we miss anything, but so on this job, documentation indicates that bath fan number 1 was non-operational and was replaced with an 80 CFM fan. So DOE made that connection that, you know, they looked at this and thought and saw, okay, yeah, it was non-operational, but this probably was getting replaced. I'm making the assumption that DOE looked at the work order and confirmed that, because that was what was on the work order on this job. So they figured that out from what was in the file. Bath fan number 2 was modeled at 50 CFM, but there was no documentation to validate that the data collection form indicate and the data collection form indicated the flow rate of 23. So they saw what you guys are seeing, that bath fan number 2 was listed as having 50 CFM, but the A03 field collection form said that they measured it at 23, and there was nothing on the work order saying that they were going to repair or replace that fan. So they had questions about that one. And then the next part, it says the final Ashrae calculation indicates a continuous flow rate of 56 CFM is required. So 56 CFM is required. The QCI form shows a measured flow rate of 64 CFM, but an intermittent rate of 20 minutes per hour. And this would give an average hourly flow rate of only 21 CFM, which would appear to not meet the CFM rate required. So I don't know if you guys see that. If you don't recognize this little snippet is from the QCI form. So this is our checklist we use when we're going through on our final QCI. And there's a little section there on Ashrae. And for the most part across the program, QCIs use this to actually document the actual flow of the whole building ventilation fan. So this QCI documented that flow was at 64 CFM. And if that was on continuous, then it would meet Ashrae. But DOE had a concern about this right here. The QCI noted that the ventilation time in minutes per hour was 20. And so if this fan was basically, this is documented saying this fan was running intermittently for only 20 minutes out of every hour, which would be, you know, a third of that, or 21 CFM. Now, in this case, I had been in this home, and Dalton and I verified that this fan was actually running continuously, and that this was just an error by the QCI. The QCI documented this was a Panasonic fan, and inside the Panasonic fans, there's two knobs. You can set the CFM flow, and that's for your continuous flow. So whatever they had set that continuous flow at, maybe it was 70 or 80, they were getting 64 CFM. There's another knob, and it says time on it. And that time dial or knob is actually, it's not the amount of, that's not an intermittent setting. The Panasonics don't have an intermittent setting on them. If you want an intermittent flow rate with Panasonic, you have to use a smart switch. The time dial on the Panasonics is to tell the fan how long to stay on high after somebody comes and flips the switch on. So there's a switch on the wall, and the fan, whether you switch the switch on or off, if you've set it up properly, the fan will run continuously at 64 CFM. And then if you flip the switch on the wall, then the fan will kick up to its highest setting, which, you know, in this case probably moves 100 CFM of air or more. And then when you flip the switch off, it will stay at its highest setting for an additional 20 minutes. And that's what this QCI documented, not understanding something in that process. So anyway, the nice thing was we had verified that this was actually set correct on our monitoring, and we were able to respond with that. But as you can see, this is what DOE was noticing. They're making these same connections. And as Valdo, they didn't notice the window discrepancy on this one, but good catch, because that is something they noticed on some other jobs, and I have noticed on a few jobs myself. So, okay, so that was this one. Let me go to the next one. Let's look at another one here. So here's the next one. Take a look at it for a minute and tell me what you guys see and what you're thinking here. This blank spot here is on purpose to indicate that there was no post Ashrae calculation. We only had a pre-calculation in this file. What are you guys noticing? Any discrepancies here?
So your square footage has got a typo in it. on your input report, you've got 2128, but on the Ashrae form, they have 1228.
Yeah.
And
So-
then, yep, this says your post blower door was 1738. And because you don't have another one of these, you don't know how much more than 45 CFM it actually needed.
Yeah, so this does not match this. And then I think the other issue on this one was the same one there that the QCI had documented the 20-minute issue. So let me pull up what DOE said. So this is what DOE said. On this job, documentation has the living area entered incorrectly, as was pointed out. So the square footage was off. And Carrie Lynn, you can see it. It was just simply a typo. It was not like, you can just see that the numbers just got mixed up.
Yeah, it's a simple keying error that just got missed.
Says there's no documentation. Yeah, sorry. Documentation has living area entered incorrectly into the pre-weatherization calculation. And there's no documentation of post calculation being performed. Using the post blower door of 1738 and 2128 square footage of living space, all other inputs matching the pre-weatherization calculation, the results in 62 CFM of continuous airflow needed. So DOE did their own calculation and found that this job should have had 62. QCI form seems to indicate the fan is set at a flow rate of 69, which would have met that if it was continuous. But that same error about the 20 minutes, this would give an average hourly flow of 23 and would not appear to meet the rate required. So how many of you guys have ever taken the time on a file to check some of these fields or to cross-check some of these fields, to look into the, you know, what was entered in the audit as far as the square footage, and make sure that that is the square footage that's being put there, or to check the blower door, whether it's a pre or post blower door, and make sure that you or the auditor actually put that in properly. So I got a comment, yes, definitely as a QCI. I'm glad to hear that. And then, you know, I know on my monitoring, I check on a couple, I always check on this one, and that was one that, you know, we noted that on our monitoring. So before this ever got sent to DOE, we'd already caught that, and the agency had already corrected it. But I had never taken a close look at this and compared this to, you know, what needed to be, or what the final was and stuff. Well, not never, I'd done it a few times. And this thing just did not stick out to me at all when I reviewed this file. So kind of interesting. All right, here's the other one that they sent us comments on. So I'll give you guys a minute, take a look at this one, and let's see if you can notice any discrepancies here.
Hey, Matt, can you make this bigger? I got good eyesight, but I can't see anything.
Yeah, let me give it a try here. Hang on.
Well,
Are you talking and have yourself muted, Turner?
I am. I apologize. It's been quiet for a minute, hasn't it?
I saw the mouse moving across the text. I had a sneaky.
Sorry about that. Thank you for that, though. Yeah, so this is what DOE said on this one. Well, it looks like there's a couple comments. Someone said there's 2 occupants versus 4, and that is exactly what DOE pointed out. So there appears to be some discrepancy between pre and post and QCI measurements. The pre documents would seem to indicate there's 2 bedrooms and 2 occupants in the home. The post documents under the master WX forms seem to show a final blower door reading of 1937. So DOE was actually pointing out a couple things here. One thing they were pointing out was they found this post blower door in a strange place in the file. It was in a weird folder that basically they weren't sure if that was the actual final blower door or not. And so just a reminder of how important it is to label things correctly and put them in a order or in a folder that it, makes sense. But yeah, so seems to show the final blower door reading of 1937. The QCI Ashrae calculation uses a blower door reading of 2270 and 4 occupants and no mechanical ventilation being required. If the alternate blower door reading, if this is the actual post blower door, is used, the mechanical ventilation would actually be required. And another comment, number of occupants does not match. Kitchen on red calc shows 90 deficit, shouldn't it be 100? Okay. Oh, it's because it's an 80, and it's because they checked the box with the operable window, so they got the 20 CFM credit for the window. So this number is correct on that. But yeah, so DOE is just noticing, from their pre-weatherization estimate and to their final calculation, the number of occupants has changed. And then, based on documentation in the file, if this is their post blower door, the numbers don't match. So if they recalculated that using the numbers that were on the final blower door, they're questioning whether or not that fan was set properly. Or sorry, not that the fan was set properly. They're questioning that, as it says here and here, sorry, this is so small, but the red calculator will tell you, this does not require installation of a mechanical ventilation system. But basically, DOE is saying, I think they used the wrong number, and this house probably should have had ventilation. So DOE is concerned on this one that we left a house that was supposed to comply with Ashrae, and it does not. So anyway, our time is gone here, but I hope that this was valuable. It was valuable to me just to get a feel for how the teacher grades our papers, and I feel like they did a great job of doing it. They did a very methodical, reasonable approach, and they did a great job. They found some things that we were already aware of. They found some things we were not aware of. And we just want to share them with you guys so that you can apply that within your circle of influence. Make sure that you're being very accurate in this kind of stuff. If it is your job to check these things, make sure that you're checking some of these things. Like, it's not always going to be on your checklist. Sometimes if you start to make some connections or have questions, go and test those questions or those assumptions and make sure that you guys are documenting stuff properly. If you have any questions about any of this stuff, or whether if you're concerned you may or may not be doing it right, reach out to us. We can take a look at it and see if we can provide any help there as well. So, so just in review, the purpose of today's training was to cover those errors that were in that technical monitoring, and with a focus on, or an emphasis on, the need to do a data cross-check. So please do whatever you can to improve those data cross-checks throughout the program. And we'll probably be providing additional training on some general Ashrae stuff in the coming months. So any questions before we end? Is there anything that we could have made clearer? Or?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when our auditor is filling out that Ashrae form, do you want them to fill that out to represent what's in the house before we start, and then call out on the work order what they want changed, and then the QCI one represents what was there when we were finished? Or do you want that first Ashrae form to be used as part of the, I guess, the planning process, where they say this is what's going to be there when we're done, and so therefore
This is a great question.
match more?
The Ashrae estimate, there's a note on the Ashrae calculator that actually answers this question, and the note is that anytime you put an Ashrae fan on that estimate, it should represent what you're going to do, whatever the house is going to be post weatherization. And that's on that first example that we looked at. That's why there was nothing wrong with. Let me back up to that one. This one here, where the auditor put in an 80 right there, that is correct. They measured, there was no fan, or it didn't work or whatever. There was a fan, it just didn't work. But this 80 was the right thing to do, and continuous. So they indicated there that this is going to be their whole building ventilation fan when the job is done. And then DOE did exactly the right thing. They went looking at the work order to make sure that that was actually installed. So
whatever is on there, if that doesn't match what they collected in the field, it's just got to be on the work order as saying, so we're going to install this. So then that confirms that. And so the 50 is wrong because there wasn't anything that said they changed that from a 23. Had they changed that from a 23 to a 50 and it had been on the work order, then that part would have also been correct.
Yes, that is correct. And thank you for bringing it up. There was one other thing I wanted to share with everybody before we end. We told DOE that we haven't committed to actually doing this because we don't know if it'll work. But we told them we would at least look at the form and like our calculator and see if we could make any improvements to help minimize some of these errors. In a few days, I will share this with this group, and you're welcome to try it out if you're willing to try it and give me feedback. I'm playing around with a draft version of the Ashrae calculator, which would put the estimate and the final calculation side by side. And it would make a little clearer some of the things that Carrie Lynn's asking about. Like it would indicate more clearly which fan is going to be used as the whole building ventilation fan. And if it's not one of the exhaust fans, then you could indicate, that it's going to be an HRV or something like that. So anyway, playing around with it to try to clarify that, to actually calculate the estimated runtime, and to lay it side by side between the auditor's estimate and the final calculation, so that this worksheet could do a couple of cross checks, so that, for example, if this one said there was an operable window and this one was different, it would, just give us some indications that there's some errors there. So it's not quite ready to hand out yet, but when I do send it out, if you're interested, please use it and provide me some feedback. One of the main questions I'm wondering is, how badly would this mess up what you guys already do? Like where we've kind of siloed this into, this is the auditor's job and this is usually the QCI's job. I don't know how well putting this into one document will work or not. and then just any other ideas to improve or help minimize errors, I would love to have them. So anyway, all right, any other questions before we end? Okay, well, thank you guys so much for attending today, and stay safe and have an enjoyable holiday season. See y'all later.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Brad.
See you, Mark.